Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Cthulhu's Vault from Jolly Roger Games. Yes, this is another Lovecraftian horror game, but quite a bit different than the large, epic-scale Fantasy Flight games that you may be used to seeing. This is actually a storytelling card game. My favorite genre. Well, no, not usually, but this one seems really interesting. Essentially what's happening here is that you're all investigators in, well, might be Arkham, might be wherever you want it to be around the world, and you are trying to get to the bottom of a series of mysteries that may result in one of the great ancient ones awakening. What are those mysteries? What are the circumstances? Which ancient one is going to awaken? Well, much of that is determined by you and the players through storytelling. And there's getting tokens and things like that that will facilitate that story as well. Let's go ahead and get a brief overview of how the game is played. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, let me give you a brief rundown of Cthulhu's Vault. Now, the game is broken up into two different halves. The first half is called the mystery section of the game, the mystery stage. Then you have the battle stage, which is one of the great ancient ones awakens. The goal of the game is to defeat that ancient one. So to defeat the ancient one, you have to actually wake them up first, which is one of many odd things in the game. But just to let you know how the setup is, each player is going to get one of these Ancient One cards face down in front of them. You don't get to look at it, but I can show you now just a few examples. It's basically all, or many of the major deities or ancient great old ones from the Cthulhu mythos. Here's Cthulhu himself, or herself, whatever. Growth and regeneration, that's his special ability. Each time you take a turn, you gain 2 cultist tokens. Anytime there's like a little skull, I know it's kind of hard to see, but that little skull token represents a cultist token, of which there's many out on the table we'll get to in a second. There's Hastur. He has madness. Each time an investigator speaks the word Hastur, they lose a d6 worth of tokens. So that's kind of a meta type of thing there. You have Yig and Poisonous Bite. Each time an investigator suffers a wound, they roll a die. On a 1 or 2, they bloat and die horribly. And then, I've never even heard of this one before, so Sagathwa, Malaise. Each investigator holds 1 less combat card, which is pretty significant. So you're going to have one of those face down in front of everyone, so you're not sure which one is going to awaken at the beginning. Now, each player is going to start off with 2 power tokens, 1 cultist token and 1 investigation token. I actually forgot to do that, so I'll just give them 2 random tokens, and then you put them face down on the swirl side. But yeah, you have the cultist tokens that are a skull, and you have the investigation tokens that are like a magnifying glass, and they come in denominations of 1 or 2, but you don't really know that when they're all face down. But you will have an active pool of face up ones of 8 of them, each for the investigation and for the cultist tokens. You're also going to start off with one of these story cards, which is what each player has in hand, 7 of them. You'll start off with one of them in play. So for instance, this is the Asylum card. So let me break down what's important here. You'll start off with this one in play, and that starts your story. So someone can just say something at that point. This is a storytelling game. So you can say, okay, the scene opens on the dark Arkham Asylum, and with shadows creeping along the edges and ineffable noises, whatever you want to say. Now, up in the top here is the type of card. This is a crosshairs, but other types of cards are, that's a crosshairs as well. There's this hand symbol, there's little people symbols, and so on. There's just different types of cards, symbols telling you what type of card that it is. And the reason that's important is because you're going to be playing these story cards down, continuing the story chain one after the other. Each player is going to play 1 story card down. And normally, if you play a story card, you're just going to get the bonus down in the bottom corner. So let's say I put the Asylum down, and then I decide to go ahead and play the Silence card. And remember, this is a storytelling game, so you can say, like, a dark silence falls over the asylum, and you and your fellow inmates look at each other. And if I were to play this card, I would look down at the bottom, and I see that I get an investigation token from the common pool, and I get a mystery token from the center pile as well. But now, if the next card I were to play after Silence has the hand symbol up on top as well, and these don't always match up, by the way, it just happens to be the case. If my next card happens to have the hand symbol, which, let's say I play Dusk, If I play Dusk after that, you see that this bonus symbol here matches this symbol up in the top card. That means that on this card, in addition to my 2 normal tokens, which in this case are mystery tokens, I also get the special bonus power, which in this case is steal a power token from any player. So, and I would tell a little story blurb, of course. So you're always going to get 2 tokens at least. It might be different denominations. But then if you can actually match up the symbols, you'll get the bonus power, and you'll get to do that as well. And this is how the game is going to continue. Each player is going to play on their turn one of their story cards down into the story. They're going to give a little bit of blurb, a sentence, a paragraph about what's going on. They're going to collect tokens of the appropriate type. It might be taking tokens from other players. So now it's dusk, and we go back to, we break free of the asylum and go back to the Silver Lodge and look in ancient arcane texts to see what is this foreboding presence is, whatever it might be. So you play these cards, and you might be like, okay, why do I want all these tokens? Well, there's a few different reasons. One is that after the second part of the game, when you get to the battle stage, you're going to want certain types of tokens because cultist tokens can fuel magic powers, and investigation tokens can also give you special abilities in the end, but you don't actually know what those abilities could be because you don't even have an investigator yet. That's one of the weird things about the game. But also, more importantly, how you determine whether you get to the battle stage or not is dependent upon the tokens that you get. First off, you're going to look at this power guide card here, and it will tell you, depending on the number of players, what you need in order for one of the ancient ones to awaken. So let's say that this is a 3-player game I have set up here. This is a bit weird, but it says summon ancient one 10 life. Well, that's actually the amount of tokens that you need in order to wake up the great ancient one. The bottom part, ancient one tokens, is how many tokens they get as life. At least I think so. Again, this is very, very confusing, but once you get to presumably 10 tokens, possibly 18, but I think 10 tokens, then whoever had managed to attain that many cultist tokens is immediately going to stop the game, and that player flips over their ancient one, and they are now the ancient one. They are now battling the other players. Now at that point, the other players are going to take the investigator cards off from the side, and they're going to lay them out, and they're going to draft the character that they want. So you have quite a few choices here. You have a reporter, a war vet, an occultist, a faithful nun, a reformed cultist, a bootlegger, a curious student. Did I say cultist for that one? I meant occultist, whatever. And up at the top corner of the card, you see they have what's supposed to be their life points, but it also has the skull symbol. Well, that's just representing that you need to use power tokens for these characters. However many tokens you've accumulated up to this point, you need to discard down to that number, and you get to choose whether or not you keep the investigation tokens or the cultist tokens. And you would want to do this based on their special abilities. So, for instance, the skeptic says you may not reveal, for the reporter says you may not reveal cultist tokens to activate incantations in combat. Well, to you, the cultist tokens are worthless, so you're probably going to want to keep nothing but investigation tokens. But the occultist says that she may reveal skulls to activate incantations in combat, so you'd want to use them for her. The number up in the other corner of the card is how many combat cards you get to start off with in play when you get to do a combat round. So for instance, just to show you some of these combat cards that you will now have access to. See, basically the whole game changes when you get to this point. A 22 pistol, you roll a die on an even number, you do a 1 wound to the ancient one. Shriveling spell, well, this is a 2 options. So if you do the top one, which is an incantation, if you're allowed to do that, you can do a shriveling spell, which is that you reveal 1 or 2 of the tokens that you have. So let's say that you have someone who can actually use those types of spells. You would reveal those types of tokens off your character card that also represents your life points, and do a wound for each one, to the ancient one for each. Or you can just choose to do the 22 pistol, roll a die, and on an even number you do 2 wounds. You have dynamite, which is just roll 3 dice and hope to deal wounds on 4, 5, or 6. The elder sign, you deal wounds, and so on. You get the idea. There's also the annoying terrified card, which just makes you roll, and if you roll poorly, your turn is done. Or if you roll an even number, you get to draw another combat card. But of course, the ancient one is not just going to sit there and take that. He or she or it has its own cards as well, and they're usually much more powerful. So for instance, Sithakwath, If you're Sathagwa, you get the bottom part, but normally you just attack a random investigator and get 3 wounds. But Sathagwa has feed. Investigators must choose. 1 investigator is devoured, or each investigator suffers 2 wounds, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different powers, and they're all keyed in. They all have a bottom ability that is keyed into certain. Some of them are any great old one, and so forth. Remember that you will have, as the Ancient One, you'll have a number of life equal to whatever the power card told you that you'll have. And then you're going to get into combat. So you're going to see which investigators are actually in play, which Ancient One is actually in play. Then you're going to build the combat deck. The combat deck is just going to consist of whatever characters you have, and then the Ancient One is you'll shuffle them up and flip over cards whenever someone comes up. So if the bootlegger is in play, then if not dead yet, the bootlegger will take their turn and finish it up, and then the curious student, then the Ancient One, and so on and so forth. You're going to keep doing this over and over again, and every time you use one of your combat cards, you redraw back to whatever your combat card limit is in order to attack again and again and again. There are dice in the game, by the way. They really are just normal D6s, but they have Cthulhu heads for the 6s, but you'll use these quite frequently in combat. And that's really the core of the game. I mean, if you're the Ancient One, if you've become the Ancient One due to circumstances, then you're just trying to kill the other players. If you are not the Ancient One, you're the investigators, you're just trying to kill the Ancient One. Whichever side wins, that completes the story. I guess if you're the Ancient One, since it's supposed to be a cooperative game, you should be hoping you die in order to complete the story. Not really sure there, but that is Cthulhu's Vault. Now, let's get to my many final thoughts. All right, we'll start off with theme, components, artwork. The theme of the game is just the Lovecraft mythos at its bare bones essentials. Just the Ancient Ones, some cultists, some holy relics, and some very generic investigators. But that's fine because, again, this is supposed to be a storytelling game. The players are supposed to inject the extra bits of story and life and theme to the game. So if you like the basic framework of the Lovecraft mythos and you want to just have your own adventures with it, then this should immediately appeal to you for theme alone. But if you're not into that Lovecraft mythos, then no amount of storytelling is probably going to fix that for you, because you're still staring at the Ancient Ones and, cultists and all that different stuff and beasts. So I do dig that stuff. I'm not a big Lovecraft nut, but I still enjoy that, so the theme did appeal to me. As far as the components go, I like the tin. It looks nice. I like the wooden tokens. The dice are imprinted, but that's okay. They still look kind of cool. And I love the artwork. I think even though the oversized cards are kind of cumbersome, I think they are served well here, and I like that you could get this big portrait, especially of the Ancient Ones, which look really awesome, which makes me wish that they were visible for most of the game. We'll get back to that later. But still, I think everything's solid. The only gripe that I have here is that nothing fits well back into the box. I mean, right as soon as you open it, it's like having to play Tetris to get all the tokens and dice back in there with the cards to actually fit. So you either have to chuck the insert or just have a real hassle every time you try to open this game and then put it back away. But that's kind of a minor gripe. Otherwise, it's pretty solid. So let's talk about the gameplay. Let's talk about one other thing first. The rulebook for this game is pretty terrible. This is a very simple game. No matter what I say from here on out, some things sound more complicated than they probably are. But I assure you, this is a simple, basic game. But you would not know that from one perusal of the rules, because it seems like important things are sort of nebulously explained, like how the Ancient One is actually supposed to wake up. There seems to be conflicting, like they don't really say and use the right terminology for describing what the life and the cultist power tokens mean. Like, one of them is the life points of the Ancient One when they awaken, but one of them is what you need as far as cultist tokens to make them awaken, but that's nebulously explained, despite the fact that other parts of the game are explained multiple times at great length over many pages for seemingly no reason. It's like, here's how this part works, but that's just a synopsis. Here's a breakdown of each of those individual parts. Now here's the roundup of how that section works. I'm like, oh, come on. We're flipping over cards. That's it. So that was very weird. So bad rule book. It definitely needed another pass. But okay, it is a simple game. You'll figure it out eventually, so let's get to it. The mystery section, which is the storytelling part. I liked this more than I thought I would. I typically do not like storytelling games, which means I probably shouldn't even have tried this game at all. But part of the reason why I don't like storytelling games is because there's nothing to grab onto. It's just very nebulous. There's no framework. I need it to be a game, and most games of the storytelling genre don't do that. But Cthulhu's Vault gives you just enough, and I do appreciate that. Yes, you're just playing a card and just getting tokens, and maybe you're matching up symbols and getting more tokens, but that's more than most storytelling games give you, and I appreciated that. And because of that, and because the storytelling was not actually essential, they even say in the book you don't technically have to do it, you just do it for fun. We did do it for fun because of that, because we didn't feel pressured to do so. So you just say a little sentence, a little blurb, just a little bit of something to give you a flavor, and the other players who were even less inclined to tell stories than I was actually got into it and had fun telling little blurbs of story and about cultists and overrunning a hospital and all these different things. It really got to be quite a bit of fun for that section of the game, despite the fact that on its surface it is just very simple, boring, collecting tokens. Some things in this phase don't make sense because you're stealing tokens from other players. Well, someone said, well, you have to keep the tokens balanced out between us. And it's like, well, okay, I guess. And that's leading into part of the problem I have with the game. There's many odd choices in this game. One of them is that it's supposed to be cooperative. It says it several times in the rulebook. It says it on the box. But when you get to the turn, which is like in Betrayal at House of the Hill, one player becomes essentially the Ancient One. I mean, they're not supposed to. It's just that their Ancient One awakens, and they happen to have them under their control. But for all intents and purposes, they become the Ancient One. So now it's a one versus all game. So it's like, well, I mean, we were stealing tokens from each other before. So one of us is now the Ancient One, and the rest of us are fighting against that person. So it's not a cooperative game. Very, very odd. Also, it was odd that only at the turn do you get an investigator. Why not just start the game with an investigator? They're all pretty generic anyways. Yes, I understand that at the turn you have to do the whole power token thing of determining which tokens are going to be your life points, which is also a very odd design choice and seems needlessly, I don't even know if complex is the right word, but just needless fluff to the game, like swapping out different tokens, like, okay, I should hold on to these type of tokens. I don't know. That was just very weird, but you don't have to do that at the beginning of the game anyways. I say just give everyone an investigator. It gives you more storytelling opportunities. So that was weird too. But alright, you get to the turn, one of you is an Ancient One, you have to fight each other. This is, okay, potentially a good impetus for more storytelling. You're one of them who's now this great, powerful Ancient One. It could be even Cthulhu himself. And the others are just investigators trying their best to fight back against this dark, evil force. And the game even says, as you battle, give little bits of story blurbs. Okay, fine. But I assure you, that's not going to last very long. Because what this whole section of the game is a very boring dice rolling slog fest, where most of the time you're missing, sometimes you hit, and all it is removing tokens. And at the beginning, you may be inclined, as we were, to do things like, I valiantly jump on the tentacled beast and start stabbing it with my holy relic, or I, throw a flaming Molotov cocktail at it and it catches fire and starts to shrivel up, or I swing on the chandelier to get at it, or if you're the Ancient One, it's like I grab you with my dark appendage, and all these different types of things. You are not going to be able to do that for very long before it's like, all right, roll. Did I miss? Great. Oh, I hit? Okay, wonderful. Are we dead yet? Oh, you're dead? Oh, I'm dead too. Okay, we're done. That is what this turns into. It is very, very random. It is very, very dull. This is supposed to be the most exciting part of the game, and it's just not. And that's really the whole problem with the game, I think. There's a lot of great ideas here, and I think that the simple gameplay, the fast gameplay, and the basic structure of it serves it well, but it needed something else. It needed something a little more excited. It needed either full cooperative play with more storytelling elements. I'm thinking of the game Fallen, which actually had more storytelling bits that you could play off of as you went through the dungeon. Something to keep it going, but just chucking dice, flipping over a card, saying, oh, 1 wound, or roll a dice, oh, I missed, can't do any wounds. And just the whole power token system just doesn't really work very well. I don't really know what they were going for here. It feels like a game that wasn't quite developed enough, just threw some ideas in a box and hoped that it would come out and that the player's storytelling would sort of fill in the gaps. But when you add it all up, it just didn't work for me, which is a shame because I think this probably came closer than any other storytelling game to actually being something that I would enjoy and keep in my collection. but it just missed it. That is Cthulhu's Vault from Jolly Roger Games.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.